Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you to another edition of Books and Looks. Yes, it's my weekly podcast where we talk about books, have author interviews, and then have something I've been looking at the past week. And this week, we are joined by Sam Boush. Now, Sam is the owner, editor, whatever, of the website called mysteryandsuspense.com. And what I try to do is bring in some leading people from the book industry, and this is Sam's one of those, to be very honest with you. And so this is a wonderful website. We're going to talk all about that. Sam's website, easy to maneuver around. He talks to us all about the different types of genres under mystery and suspense. You know, I don't know what they are, but there are 10, 12, 14 different genres. He tells us all about it. He tells us about the creation of the website. He also tells us about how you could even, if you're interested in this, you can submit book reviews. Yeah, you can submit book reviews, and they might be published. They have author interviews. They have many things there. They even have reviews of TV and movies. Yeah, that's something different you don't usually see. It is the only, well, I shouldn't say the only one, but it is the premier website that is dedicated to mystery and suspense books. And you want a book there, you will find loads and loads and loads of books that you can get the review on. And they're not done by like one person. For instance, if you go to viewsonbooks.com, you will see my reviews of these books. But with Sam, he's got 25, 30 people writing. And so there's a constant change almost every day. New content is going up there. And so I think you're going to really, really enjoy hearing his thoughts on this, and also why people don't like Canadian mysteries. That was a head scratcher to me. So anyway, hey, why don't we get right into this and start with our interview of Sam Boush, who's coming to us early morning out in Portland, Oregon. Sam, welcome to Books and Looks.
Great to be here, Blaine.
All right. We're so happy that you could be here. mysteryandsuspense.com. This website, Sam, is really out of this world. It's wonderful. It's dedicated to those types of books. When did you begin that? And what made you decide you wanted to get into that type of a website on books?
Sure. Well, it started in summer 2020. I think we were all doing some COVID projects, and that was mine. What made me want to jump into it was really just, giving back to mystery, suspense, thriller community that I'd been a part of for a while, and it kind of grew from there.
I see. So now, did you go to college, and did you take any classes or anything that helped you with making this website for a career, be it graphic arts or computer programming or anything else?
Well, I've been in the digital side of marketing for a long time. In fact, more than 20 years now. So yeah, I have a background in sort of all things digital, and the creating of the website is definitely not that hard, especially with technology right now and the way things work on the content management system side. It's pretty easy.
I see. Okay. Well, that's great. I'm glad you can do that. It's beyond me. But again, we're a little bit different in age, so I know little. Do you write any books? Have you written any?
I have not recently. So the writing side, I leave to people probably a lot more skilled than myself.
Now, when you did write,
I would love to get back into it someday.
Okay. Now, when you did write, were you writing mystery and suspense books?
Yeah. When I did write, so my first published book was around 2017, and that was, I would describe it as an apocalyptic thriller. It did okay, but it was published by a very small press that went out of business. But there's a Wikipedia page on it. It did okay. And then I also published, I had an agent. I have an agent, I guess, still technically, but I had an agent who shopped a book around. It ended up instead being made into full cast audio drama starring Thora Birch. Thora Birch was, I don't know, the little girl in Hocus Pocus, and she was in The Walking Dead more recently, I think. So she was the main character, but that I would describe as a military thriller with speculative elements.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Now you write, and you write. You have the website mysteryandsuspense.com. What qualifies as a mystery and suspense? What are the genres and what type of categories do you see there if a person goes to your website?
I love that you ask that, because genre is such a funny question, and it's something that I deal with all the time, but I don't think that writers necessarily think of genre all that much. And readers, I think of genre not all that much. They read what they like, and they often like along the lines of a genre. They just may not be as aware of that. So for mystery and suspense, we publish mainly mystery, crime, thriller, horror, and suspense. But really, on the fringes of that, it includes a lot of subgenres you wouldn't necessarily think of. So a subgenre that would fall into that category at the fringe might be romantic suspense. But our bread and butter is really mystery, thriller, and crime, with a lot of horror too. So those are the main genres. And then subgenre is a fun topic. I'm sure I could bore your listeners for a long time with that.
No. If you just want to mention a few of them, you say there's a romantic mystery.
Well, as far as mysteries, common ones for mystery would be police procedural, cozy mystery, suspense mystery. Those would be common mystery genres. Horror could be monster horror, supernatural horror, splatterpunk horror. For crime, noir is common, and crime thriller is probably the biggest genre in crime. Suspense really runs the gamut. Historical suspense is pretty popular, and I didn't mention that one before. And then for thriller, it's that's a huge genre that could have anything from legal thriller, medical thriller, conspiracy thriller. It just, and you can just start naming thrillers, and there's a list of 20 of them at least.
Right. Okay. Now, do if a person wants to go on there and say, well, gee, I really like to see a good recommendation for maybe a true crime or a nonfiction book on crime, do you have that also?
Absolutely. It's easy to navigate from the top to find those specific genres, and then just going from the main page, you can find a lot of popular genres, and a lot of times I think people start out coming to the website because they've found a book that they like, or a topic that they like, maybe through organic search or social or something else, and on every review or feature there are other links to other books or other features in that same category.
Wow. Okay, so this is quite inclusive. You can get a lot of information off this website, friends. Wow, very good. Well, it's a good website. Absolutely, I like to go to it. I like to read that. But before we get into that, growing up, did you have any favorite authors or books that you liked as you were growing up?
Yeah, well, when I was growing up, I was not much of a mystery or thriller fan. I was much more of a science fiction fantasy fan. So my favorite author was probably Robert Jordan, who, when I was, I think 13 years old, I wrote him a letter and he wrote back, which was excellent.
That's great. Now, does that love of the science fiction continue through to today? Are you reading a lot of those sorts of books?
I do. I still love science fiction, and I love it as a genre. And I think it also crosses over pretty well a lot of times into the thriller genre. A sci-fi thriller would be a topic that we cover fairly regularly, and not so much, space opera or science fiction fantasy, but there's a lot of crossover. And that's the thing about genre in general too, is there's a lot of movement between, which is I think healthy and good and fun for readers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I start looking at books and I decide if I want to get them or read them or whatever it is, I do see a lot more in that science fiction mystery category than I remembered ever seeing previously. So I don't know what's caused that.
Readership across genres goes up and down the same way it does with movies. True crime, like you mentioned earlier, is a huge genre right now, and there are other genres that have taken a nosedive. You don't see a lot of Westerns anymore, and I'm not just talking about movies, of course, but reading also. whereas romantic suspense would be a huge genre. And more recently, LGBTQ thrillers, LGBTQ suspense has gone from nothing to being, a sizable demographic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, we have not all true crime is gory and horror, I should say. We had a gentleman on who wrote a book about food and crime, and that was a heck of an education, finding out all the crimes that go on with cheese and maple syrup, and even I think it was, what was the other, artichokes or something like that. It's unbelievable. So yeah, there's that fascinating. Everybody thinks true crime is nothing but blood and gore, but it's a lot more than that.
It's also choking on an artichoke that the Black Widow put in front of you.
That's right. Very good. Wow. Well, now, like I said, this book is loaded with books. You have blogs. You've got author interviews. It's got TVs and movies. This keeps growing. Every time, like every few months I go, I'm seeing more and more and more on the website. Was that a logical progression, or did you get a lot of feedback that they like to see more from your website?
Well, mystery and suspense, needs to keep up. I'm talking about the website itself. It needs to keep up with what's happening. So, every year there are 2 million books published, though most of those are self-published. And, we work with a lot of imprints, and by work with, I mean they send us press releases and such. And while I don't do a lot of the work myself, our reviewers review books, and we try to get a review up every day. And there's so much happening in the space that, I think there's usually at least a couple articles that go up every day. And like I said, I don't have a huge hand in it so much. It's really our reviewers and writers who do the bulk of the work. I get to sit back and talk to Blaine on the phone.
Yeah, well, that's great. Now, but I don't remember this, and I may be mistaken. I don't remember the TVs and the movie reviews at the beginning. Were they there, and I just didn't see them?
They weren't, and that's still a relatively small part of the overall output of the website. So it's a small part, but interestingly, and this is sort of insider baseball, you probably won't be surprised that's something that makes a big impact as far as readership for us. The number of fans of a TV show, will vastly outpace most books. We probably, though, only publish 1 out of every maybe 50 reviews would be on a screen topic. In general, it's really dedicated to books.
Right. Okay.
With the exception of the features, which include both, and a lot of adaptations.
Right. And you also have interviews.
We do, and that's uniquely with authors. I can think of a few examples. Some editors, Tom Colgan from Penguin, and I think some writers who maybe cross over and were made famous by acting, for example.
Have you found that the authors are receptive to being interviewed?
I have rarely had an author not want to be interviewed. And right now, I think a lot of the interviews I'm not doing myself. Other people are doing, but I still will do an occasional interview, and I, especially if it's a hard to get person. And yes, they're very receptive. I don't think I've been turned down very many times for interviews.
That's wonderful. I know when I was working with you, you allowed me to interview, was it Myers? But Dion Myers, is that his name? The gentleman from South
That's
Africa?
Right.
Yeah.
South Africa.
Right. Good gentleman, good writer. And plug for him if you have never read his books. You're going to like them. They're very, very good books. So, yeah, like him a lot. But, how many people write for you and or submit articles to you?
Quite a few, and it depends on how you consider it as far as how active people are. But the number is in a couple dozen who are fairly active.
And then because you get people sending you book reviews or articles, interviews, etc., has this become a full-time job for you?
Oh, absolutely not. I have a full-time job doing something else that I really love. And I would put this on the scale of hobby in the fullest definition of the word. I'm an amateur with the amat firmly in that. So yes, it's not a full-time job.
Wow. Still, it's an impressive amount of output, and that's wonderful. So, do you track the people who follow you, readers? Do you have a huge following, I'm assuming?
There are a lot of people, much more than I would have expected, who regularly show up to the website, and there are similarly a lot of people who find us every day in the hundreds or thousands or more every day who come to that website. So it does quite well, but that's a really less of a testament to the success of mystery and suspense, and more, I think, the size of the readership of these genres.
Well, there are not a lot of quality that I have found, okay? A lot of quality websites out there where a person can go to and get the scope of the mystery and suspense and the thrillers, etc., that you feature on your website. And that's, I think, a credit to you, and that you've opened it up to all these different genres and all the different interviews and book reviews, and you run the gamut, and I think that really helps.
Well, I have thoughts on this because on one hand, there were a lot of big players in this space who have since kind of either gone away entirely or fallen off. Just one example, though there are many, is Suspense magazine, which was a unrelated precursor to Mystery and Suspense. Though I love their domain and the name of their site, and they at one time had a physical magazine, and then for a long time a digital magazine, and I believe the owners of that now write for The Big Thrill, which is the International Thriller Writers magazine, but that was a big producer of content in our genre, and it's gone away, and there are others similar to that. So as the decline of magazines goes in one direction, there's room in the ecosystem for new players, and I think that for me personally, this is a passion project that I take a long-term view on, and it doesn't need to be profitable. What it needs to do is serve the community, and I think that that's what's great about it, is that it's a space for books, and there are fewer of them than there used to be.
Okay. Well, and I think another thing that drives people to look for book websites is the fact that most all of the newspapers have eliminated their book review sections, their Sunday book reviews. And
that's a great example. Yeah. And it's a shame. I think what we're looking at now in 2023 and beyond is that for decades, the share of market of books has been outpaced by other forms of entertainment. So, there are a lot more people who watch Netflix than read books. And I mean, even for myself, I read. I have books next to me right now, and when I can find the time, I definitely do that. Probably more than a lot of people. I'll always have a book that I'm reading, or several. I also listen to books on audio when I'm driving or other times. At the same time, I think I and everybody else also watches TV, watches movies. Video games are a huge source of entertainment. Just you look out as in the broad space of books in our zeitgeist, they have been diminishing, and you see that reflected in media.
Let me ask this question. Have you read the book or seen the movie Killers of the Flower Moon?
I have not. I've heard good things, though. That's just out with Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Right.
No, I haven't yet.
I read the book, and my son went to see the movie. So I don't know. I don't go to movies. I stopped going to movies a long time ago. So when it comes out on a streaming service, that's when I'll be able to see and compare. But that's always fun to do, by the way, to read the book. And what do you do first? Do you read the book or do you go to the movie?
Oh, for me, it's reading the book first. I've definitely heard this as a chicken and the egg situation. Most of the time when I read the book first, I'm not as happy with the screen adaptation. But there are some times that it really captures that and does really well. But in general, I would prefer a book over a movie. Then again, there are some amazing adaptations out there.
I'm with you though. I'd rather read the book first, but when you, as with you, when you see the amount of books that we have to read, it's impossible to get to them, and the movie will come out many times before I get around to reading the book. So what can you do? Now, do you work with any specific publishing companies?
Well, when you say work with, I'll just take that to mean, do any specific publishing companies send us daily invitations, press releases, author invitations to interview authors? And the answer is all of the big five publishing companies plus major independents like Thomas and Mercer, which is Amazon, or Kensington, which is independent, Blackstone, which is independent. Those are some, Head of Zeus. Those are big independents, but every one of the big five has at least a couple imprints in our genre.
Okay. All right. That's good. And then they contact you or they send stuff out to you. Do you assign books for people to read, or do they just read them and send them into you?
It's the latter. They'll send them into me if they're ever looking for a book. My inbox has them, and so I can send them. They mostly read NetGalley widgets, which are easy to procure. So there's no shortage there. And in general, because of the nature of this project, we're really looking at books published as they're being published. We'll review books up to a year after publication, but in general, the way that the cycle works is that reviews are being published just ahead of release or at release.
All right. I had a similar situation where I was asked by an author to delay the podcast publication to coincide with his book publishing, and I did. And it was just a couple of weeks ago. The author's name was Scott Iman, who wrote a fabulous book called Charlie Chaplin versus America. And lo and behold, the same day that my podcast came out, Scott's on TCM hosting and being be a guest during a night of Charlie Chaplin movies. So that was sort of neat to say you could hear him first on me, and then you heard him on Turner Classic Movies. So it happens. Yeah, it's hard to do though, isn't it? Because you want to be as close to publication time as possible, but it's difficult to get it reviewed and reviewed and up by that time.
Well, I think that publicists have this more or less figured out, and the insider baseball, I guess, for any authors listening to this is that major imprints will start on a book's marketing maybe 6 months ahead of the release date, and they will essentially be done when the book comes out. So, there are exceptions, especially if a book does incredibly well, they'll often continue on. It's rare. What publishers are really looking for, and I say publishers now, not publicists, is for that first one to catch fire, and then an author to write a sequel or another book and have that be published 6 months to a year later. That's really the goal, and then to continue stacking those wins to make a brand, and that brand could be the next Stephen King or Michael Connelly or Karen Slaughter. That's how they do that. And also for any authors listening to this, the trick of this, which is much easier said than done, is to line up all of your publicity at one time and to have it hit as big as possible, because cutting through all the noise of the ridiculous number that I mentioned earlier of books published every year and having people, pick up that book and want to read that and really make some crazy sales is difficult to do, and that's really how you do it. And if we want to talk about numbers too for a minute, Blaine, if this isn't getting too far afield.
No, that's fine.
The book publishing industry is looking for a book that can sell 3,000 to 10,000 copies would be excellent. There was a lawsuit recently against Simon and Schuster, which required them to disclose more of what's underneath the kimono than they really would want to. And there were titles that they were publishing that had sold 12 copies for first run books. And it's shocking. And they clearly aren't going to make their money back on that kind of product. But what they really want is to create that must-read book that you mentioned. The Flowers of the Killer Moon?
Killer of the Flower Moon.
Killer of the Flower Moon. That was a success before it was ever adapted. And now that it's adapted, there's no doubt that it will be a major win for the publisher. And it's those wins that really keep the business going. And there's going to be a lot of books that don't sell.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I heard some amazing statistic about the number of books that sell 1,000 copies, and it's so minuscule. It's like, oh my God, I never realized it. But people still keep writing, don't they?
Well, there's no shortage of writers. The readers is what we really need, and a lot of people still read, and it hasn't gone away, but it has changed, and tastes change, and measures of success change.
Yeah. Well, now let's talk a little bit about it's now November, and this morning I woke up and it was 29 degrees here in Greenville, South Carolina. And it's time for winter books and time for getting all snuggled up and reading any winter books. Do you have any good winter books you could recommend to us?
Well, I haven't read this one personally, but Blood Sisters, which we've just reviewed, and there's also an interview, apparently is just doing wildly well. So I can't off the top of my head tell you who wrote that one, but that's a new one, and I've heard really good things.
Do certain authors specialize certain times of year?
Oh, that's certainly true. That there's a cadence of publication yearly for certain authors. I'm not sure that that's based so much on snuggling up next to the fire and reading this particular book or that one. That might be the case, but definitely it's the case that there are those authors. I think you might see more mysteries in the winter and more domestic thrillers, which is a big summer read, a beach read, overwhelmingly female demographic, who love those stories in the summer.
I had an author on, we discussed beach reads and women's fiction and all this stuff. And, she said that she didn't believe her book was a beach read, and that's okay. And she said all she cared about was people reading it. Okay. So she's done rather well with that. So I'm glad for that. I mean, I just finished last night another cozy mystery, which you're right. Usually beginning Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, these cozy mysteries, they come out, they just come out like an avalanche at you. Do you see that?
Absolutely. And one thing that I think cozy mysteries are wonderful at is bringing up seasonality. So, anyone who's a cozy reader will know that they have something for everyone. But if you want a Halloween cozy, there are 100 of those. And if you want a Christmas cozy, there are 100 of those. And if you want a canine cozy or a food cozy or an Easter cozy or a knitting cozy, there's something for everyone there.
That's very true. Very, very true. And I had the one I just read, which I'm not going to mention it right now, but I have the author coming on in a few weeks. It's the first time that the book cover that she's written around 30 books. It's the first time it's specifically geared for a Christmas audience. There's snow and there's, in the title, there's snow on the front of the book and everything else. So we know when that's supposed to be read. But no, that's interesting. Yeah, that's, do you get a lot of cozies? Is that a heavily traveled part of your website? Do people love cozy mysteries?
Yes, I would say. I was trying to think about how to answer that, and the answer is absolutely, unequivocally yes. Cozies are a huge genre. When I was talking earlier about tastes changing. I think that cozies have really stayed at the top of mystery for quite a while, and maybe that's a backlash against a brutal world, to have a mystery that where a lot of the violence takes place off screen, off page, or maybe it's a testament to the kind of people who like to read at volume,
right?
Because there's that hit book that maybe does really well, but then, and that a lot of people read. I don't know. I think of like Ready Player One from more than a decade ago. That that gets a lot of reads, but the people who read over and over again in the mystery, thriller, suspense, crime, horror genres, the biggest one is probably cozies, because people who read cozies can read a couple hundred of them a year.
Yes. Yep. Yes, they are. I should give it more. I guess I got to give it a little bit more effort on my part, but I've read too many cozies which are set in Strawberry Town on Blueberry Lane with, the world's worst attempts at coming up with names of avenues, streets, towns, businesses, etc. That turns me off. Maybe that's what people like, but I just, for me, I don't want the Hallmark Channel to read. Okay, that's not for me.
Well, there's a lot of mystery and thriller out there that's not in the cozy genre, of course, and I think different people go into reading for different things, and there's a lot of suspenseful, very interesting mysteries that have the twists of Gone Girl, or the action of the Terminal List. Those are big titles that have a lot of readers who go after something completely different than the cozy reader.
No doubt about it. I talked with an author this summer. I don't know if you ever heard of him. His name is Will Thomas, out in Oklahoma. He's got a Victorian mystery series, and when he began, he envisioned 20 books in this series. Most people envision one, maybe two. He has 20, and he's on number 15 has just come out. So
good for him.
Yeah, so obviously somebody's making it. But again, I don't know what you're seeing, but I like somebody like Will because he takes that era, the Victorian era, which is a very popular genre, I think, with mysteries. And he doesn't do the Sherlock Holmes. He doesn't try to be Sherlock Holmes. He brings a whole different grouping of people to look at that and to look at the different types of mysteries. And to me, that's an interesting sort of a book. Do you see a lot of Victorian mysteries coming out?
I have seen quite a few. Maybe that's because of the resurgence of Golden Age as an interesting, I don't know, precursor. Maybe it's because it's an interesting historical time frame, just generally for mysteries that's sort of set in the Victorian. I think that there's also a wide readership in Gothic, and Victorian and Gothic go fairly hand in hand. And I'm not saying that Will Thomas falls into this space because I'm not sure, but Gothic has been seeing a resurgence. A famous example that I can think of is Mexican Gothic, which came out, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And there's just a lot of interest, I think, in that sort of vaguely spooky, but also just a very interesting, I don't know, subgenre, because Gothic really isn't about an era, so it doesn't have to be Victorian, but it's about feeling, and it's about like a sense of place that's a bit hard for me to describe, but it could be anything. It could be Southern Gothic or Gothic Noir, or it could be Victorian Gothic, and I think that there may be some overlap there.
Yeah, it's the reason I liked some of the Victorian Gothics, and I like that era, is because it's before we have all the heavy influence of technology. You don't have fingerprints, really. You don't have a lot of other things. You don't have CCTV cameras. You you got to really, sleuth around and find what's going on. And that's one thing I like, to see if I can, and I don't, outthink the writer. No, never really happens.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I think that Victorian, among other places and times, may appeal to readers who are looking to escape what is a complicated technological world that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some there's some wonderful books that are coming out from England and that. So do most of the books you get, are they coming from the United States or are they coming from overseas?
I would say a large part from the US and UK. It's interesting, you work a little bit in this space and you see that readers have their own tastes, especially American readers. English is a huge market for books. It's read outside of even English-speaking countries, and the US is the biggest of those. You see some examples of books that are being set in other places besides the US. I think of like Jane Harper's The Dry, which is set in Australia. But I've heard that American readers do not like books that are set in Canada. And so often Canadian writers, to their chagrin, will take a book that's maybe set in a small Canadian town and post facto move it across the border into North Dakota or Minnesota or similar, in order to appeal to that much larger audience, which is a darn shame, but it's the reality.
Why would you think that is, Sam? What are you hearing? Is there any feedback as to why they don't like the Canadian?
Oh, well, I've heard this many times, and I've heard this from mostly Canadian authors. And if there are any listeners who want to, get back to Blaine and provide your feedback, but I think that a lot of readers are looking for the right mix of familiar and unfamiliar, and they mentally categorize a book that is set in Canada as not for them. Whereas if the book takes place in the same small town, but it's in Montana, they suddenly think, oh, this is for me. And we all do that with products. That's what marketing is all about, is watching a Coca-Cola commercial and you see yourself reflected on that screen and you think, oh, a man my age can drink Coca-Cola, which I don't. But, that's what marketing and product placement is all about. And at the end of the day, a book is a product, and it's a product that's competing in a very saturated market.
Very true. Of course, then there's the outlier like Louise Penny, who just keeps, cranking them out and doing very well. And lots of people like her mysteries set up at, what is that, Three Pines or something like that. I can't remember, but she does very well up in Canada. But wow, great. Now let's talk a little bit about, I wanted to ask a little bit about your writers. Now, do you go out and seek writers, or do people say to you, hey, I see this, would you be interested in my book reviews?
In 2020, when I started this website, I did go and reach out to writers. I haven't really done that since the first couple months of the website's inauguration. There's really no need. There are a lot of people come to us, and I think it's great if any of your listeners are feature writers or want to interview authors or write reviews, then certainly have them go to the website and reach out. But in general, there's no need, because they come to us. And like I mentioned before, this is a passion project, one that is, if you look at in terms of the the people coming to the website, is hugely successful. It's also successful for me because it's other people who are putting their time in, which I wildly respect. But no, I don't have to reach out to anyone, and that's for my own benefit.
So I'm the outlier that you reached out to one time. Huh?
You were early. I was. I guarantee it was this summer of 2020.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And I read a few, and then my eyes started going. I can't read. Back then, I was doing around 150, 175 books a year. I can't do that anymore. I just Plus, you sort of get burned out. I do. I have to keep going back and forth between genres and everything else. And right now I'm reading histories. I tell you, I can't get enough of the histories. I guess that's why I'm 70. Then you want to go back and look at history. But that's fascinating. Have you ever had to say no to anyone? Be it an interview, be it a publicist, be it book review?
Well, I probably wouldn't do this now, but I had in the past a couple of prolific book reviewers who just weren't producing the content that was, what we were looking for. So, there's a nice way to go about that, and I hope I met that.
Okay, good, wonderful. Do you get the books sent to you now, or do you just get links to the books? When you get a
general, they don't even come to me at all.
Okay,
they just go to various reviewers. I'll get a press release, which I can forward on, or I can request a book all through NetGalley. And yes, people do send me books, which I think is very nice. And if they're right, I might hand them to my daughter, or I might read them myself. But I don't really write reviews, so it's really entirely unnecessary to send me a book, and is much more likely to be recycled than anything.
Well, I've gotten to the point again with my eyes that some of these books just don't come through that well on my Kindle device for some reason, or the app, and so I have to request an advanced reader copy. And most everybody's extremely polite and sends me a written, a printed copy, and that's very nice. And but boy, oh boy, it's after a while, everybody starts sending them to you. For my house is jammed right now, so. But this has been fascinating. This is a lot more. Oh, by the way, question: do you believe that mystery suspense is the number one genre of book in America?
When you say number one, are you looking at that subjectively, like the best, or are you saying top selling?
The most.
Top selling. I would doubt it. I would expect that romance is the top selling genre. That's my guess, but I could be wrong.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're sneaking romance into historical fiction now.
I feel like they've been doing that for a long time. Oh, but actually a straight historical fiction that has, well, there is a difference too between the romance genre and romantic elements in a story. And we could, if we had time, we would talk about that to a degree. But a romance is a little bit like a country western song in that it moves along tropes. And I'm not a reader myself, but this is my understanding. And there are rules to romance that are sacrosanct, and so I wonder if a romantic storyline in a historical fiction novel would really classify as a romance at that point. There are historical romances though, which is its own thing. So that's genre is a tricky place, and we can maybe agree or disagree, but ultimately I think that publishers are the real, even more than readers, are the real, gatekeepers of what is a genre and how it's displayed.
And you can find it all on mysteryandsuspense.com. It's all there.
Thanks, Blaine.
It is a wonderful website. I was honored to have worked with Sam for a few months while my eyes were still doing okay. Very nice. He let me do an interview with Dion Myers, which I really appreciated. And he actually gave me the start and the idea for doing what I'm not doing. And it's a wonderful website, lots of books, movies, interviews, you name it. It's all there, all brought to you by the good folks at mysteryandsuspense.com. And there's Sam Boush. He's leading the way. Sam, thank you so very much for spending some time with us on Books and Looks.
Thanks so much, Blaine.
All right. We'll be right back in a moment, friends. Well, thank you so very much, Sam. I appreciate you taking time out from your busy schedule to join us here on Books and Looks. And friends, today we're going to talk a little bit about what I've been looking at for the last, not too many days, but it's been out there. On Sunday, our clocks, quote, fell back. That's right. We fell back into standard time. Thank goodness. Hallelujah. I love standard time. We being mankind, created time. And the earliest known measurement of what time it is and the days was a sundial. Well, if you go out now that it's standard time, and look up at, noon, 12 o'clock, when you look straight overhead, there's the sun. When we go and went to the daylight savings time, the sun's not overhead until 1 in the afternoon. You see? We have created a change in time for no good reason. And what happens is the people out there have conned us, into believing that we are actually saving daylight. No, we're not doing anything. It's the exact same amount of daylight now as there was yesterday or last week or next week. It doesn't change. Daylight does not change. No, just the clock changes, okay? That's all. But you know what I liked? This morning I woke up. It was a little before 7 o'clock, and you could see sun. You could see the light. It was dawning. Yesterday, you couldn't see a doggone thing. It was pitch black. Yeah. They talk about, the kids are doing better if they can go to school in the sunshine and sunlight. Well, I'll tell you what, if we don't turn over to standard time, they're still going to be going to school when it's pitch black. And you say, well, it gets dark early. Let me tell you why. It gets dark early even with daylight savings time in the winter. That's just the nature of the beast. Europe, the European Union, who I don't always, compliment, but they want to abolish daylight savings time. Kudos. While our government, they think we should always be on daylight savings time. I just don't get it, friends. I just don't get it. And I'm 70. So when growing up, it was almost a 50-50 split between daylight savings time and standard time. Okay. I really don't know why we did this other than, we're talking about maybe World War I to get our tanks out earlier in the bombardments. That was one of the reasons. To help the farmers in the fields back when they didn't have electrified things. Yeah, let's remember, a lot of this daylight savings time all ties into electrification or lack thereof. Now we've got it. It's easy to keep going and doing things. If they have to be in the fields, they can turn on the lights, okay? And if not, oh my. So it gets dark at 8:30 instead of 9:30, okay? It's not a big deal. It doesn't make a big deal of difference at all. Anyway, I've been looking at time. There's some wonderful books about time. Matter of fact, you can read some of the book reviews I have on time on reviewsonbooks.com. But I really think that, for me, we're back at natural time. We're back at the way the world's supposed to be. High noon is high noon, not high 1 o'clock. Gary Cooper didn't make that movie high 1 o'clock. He made it high noon. That's right. Anyway, that's what we've been talking about. Last week we're talking about woolly caterpillars. This week we're looking at daylight savings time versus standard time. Whew, I'll tell you, these are heady topics we're talking about here. So anyway, hey, listen, on behalf of viewsonbooks.com, on behalf of Podcast Studio X, this is Blaine DeSantis for Books and Looks saying, may all your leaves be pages in a book.